When James Carter boarded SkyBridge Airlines Flight 447 wearing a hoodie and jeans after a week-long vacation, the racist flight attendant took one look at him sitting in first class and demanded he move to economy. "This seat is for passengers who actually paid for first class," she said loudly, as other passengers watched. What she didn't know, James wasn't just a passenger. He was the airline's VP of operations, her boss's boss's boss. And her assumption just ended her career at 30,000 feet. James Carter had worked for SkyBridge Airlines for 18 years. He'd started as a gate agent fresh out of college, worked his way through operations management, regional oversight, and finally, at age 44, been promoted to vice president of operations for the airline's entire North American division. He oversaw 12,000 employees, managed logistics for 800 daily flights, and reported directly to the CEO. But James never forgot where he came from. He still flew commercially whenever possible, often using his employee travel benefits to experience the airline from a passenger's perspective. He'd learned that the best way to identify problems was to see them firsthand: how gate agents handled delays, how flight crews managed difficult situations, how the airline treated customers when executives weren't watching. In early November, James had taken a rare week off to visit his family in San Diego. No work emails, no conference calls, just relaxation. He'd spent the week in shorts and t-shirts, walking on the beach, eating fish tacos, remembering what it felt like to not be in a suit. Now, on Sunday evening, he was heading back to Atlanta on SkyBridge Flight 447. He'd dressed casually for the flight. Dark jeans, a comfortable gray hoodie, white sneakers. He carried only a backpack with his laptop and a change of clothes. His employee ID was in his wallet, but he wasn't planning to announce himself. He just wanted to fly home, maybe catch up on some reading, and ease back into work mode. James had booked himself in first class using his employee travel benefit, a perk that came with his position. As a VP, he was entitled to complimentary upgrades on any SkyBridge flight with available seats. He'd checked in online, received his boarding pass with seat 2A clearly printed, and headed to the airport. Boarding began at 6:15 p.m. James waited until the priority boarding group was called, then walked down the jet bridge with the other first-class passengers. Most were business travelers in suits or business casual attire. A few wealthy-looking couples. James, in his hoodie, stood out. He stepped onto the aircraft and was greeted by two flight attendants at the door, a young Latino man who smiled warmly, and a white woman in her late 40s with auburn hair pulled into a tight bun. Her name tag read Susan Whitfield, lead flight attendant. "Good evening. Welcome aboard," the young man said. James nodded and smiled. "Evening." He moved into the first-class cabin. 8 rows of spacious leather seats, each with extra legroom, personal entertainment screens, and amenities that made the premium ticket price worthwhile. His seat, 2A, was on the right side, window seat, second row. James stowed his backpack in the overhead bin and settled into his seat. The leather was soft, the space generous. He pulled out his phone to text his wife that he'd boarded, then reached for the magazine in the seat pocket. That's when he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me, sir?" James looked up. Susan Whitfield stood in the aisle, her expression hovering between professional and skeptical. "Yes?" James said. "Can I see your boarding pass?" It wasn't an unusual request. Flight attendants sometimes verified seat assignments during boarding. James pulled up his mobile boarding pass on his phone and showed her. Seat 2A. First class. Susan squinted at the screen, then back at James. "This shows seat 2A. "That's correct," James said. "That's this seat." Susan's lips pressed into a thin line. "Did you purchase this ticket yourself?" The question was odd, inappropriate even, but James kept his voice calm. "I'm an employee. This is an employee benefit ticket." "I see," Susan said, her tone suggesting she didn't quite believe him. "And what's your employee number?" James hesitated. He could provide it, but the question felt intrusive. Other first-class passengers were watching now, curious about the exchange. "Is there a problem?" James asked evenly. "I just need to verify your ticket is legitimate," Susan said. "We've had issues with people using fraudulent employee passes." James took a slow breath. He'd dealt with this before, assumptions based on his appearance, but it never stopped being exhausting. Susan Whitfield was terminated 3 days later. Her case became a training example across the airline, a cautionary tale about assumptions, bias, and the consequences of treating passengers differently based on appearance. Over the next year, SkyBridge implemented James's recommendations. Flight attendants went through intensive training. Customer service metrics were tracked by passenger demographics, and complaints about discriminatory treatment dropped by 54%. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some veteran flight attendants complained about being micromanaged or accused of bias. A few quit, but most embraced the training, recognizing that their assumptions had been harming passengers. 6 months after the incident, James was on another flight, this time in his suit, returning from a business meeting. The flight attendant, a young black woman, greeted him warmly. "Mr. Carter, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you flying with us today." James smiled. "Thank you, but you should greet every passenger this way, regardless of who they are or what they're wearing." She smiled back. "We do now. That's what they taught us in training. Treat every passenger with dignity and respect because you never know their story." "Exactly," James said. As the plane took off, James looked out the window and thought about Susan Whitfield. He didn't take pleasure in her termination, but he believed that sometimes accountability was the only path to change. You couldn't fix a system by ignoring its failures. You fixed it by exposing them, addressing them, and refusing to accept that's just how things are. Susan had seen a black man in a hoodie and decided he didn't belong in first class. She'd been wrong about who James was, but more importantly, she'd been wrong about the entire premise, that belonging in first class was something you could determine by looking at someone. The truth was simpler. If you had a ticket for a seat, that seat was yours. Period. Everything else was just bias dressed up as protocol, and James was determined to make sure that at SkyBridge Airlines that bias would no longer fly. If this story resonated with you, remember, flying while black isn't just inconvenient, it's dehumanizing. It's being questioned when others aren't. It's being assumed to be in the wrong seat, using a fraudulent ticket, not belonging in premium spaces. But when people in power use their authority to demand systemic change, entire cultures can shift. Share this story. Subscribe for more moments that challenge us to see everyone as deserving of dignity. And if you work in travel or hospitality, remember, every passenger deserves respect, regardless of what they're wearing, how they look, or where they're sitting. "Susan," Captain Mitchell said, his voice professionally neutral, "this is James Carter. You removed him from the aircraft?" "Yes," Susan said. "He was using an employee benefit ticket and refused to verify his credentials. I was following protocol." "Do you know who James Carter is?" Captain Mitchell asked. Susan blinked. "Should I?" "He's the Vice President of Operations for SkyBridge Airlines North American Division. He oversees this entire fleet. He's my boss's boss." The color drained from Susan's face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. James spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Ms. Whitfield, I boarded this flight with a legitimate ticket, assigned to my confirmed seat. You questioned my credentials, demanded verification beyond what was required, and when I declined to be interrogated, you called security and had me removed from the aircraft. Can you tell me why?" Susan's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know who you were." "That's the problem," James said. "You saw a black man in a hoodie sitting in first class, and you assumed I didn't belong there. You assumed my ticket was fraudulent. You assumed I was trying to scam the airline. You made all of those assumptions in seconds, without any actual evidence of wrongdoing. That's not... I was just following protocol." "What protocol?" James asked. "Show me the protocol that says flight attendants should question black passengers more thoroughly than white passengers. Show me the protocol that says hoodies disqualify you from first class." Susan's eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," James corrected. and that choice was rooted in bias. How many other passengers have you treated this way? How many black travelers have you questioned, moved, or humiliated because you decided they didn't look like they belonged in premium cabins? Susan didn't answer. She couldn't. Captain Mitchell spoke up. Susan, you're suspended effective immediately. You'll return to the gate, collect your belongings, and leave the airport. HR will contact you tomorrow. James, I'm putting my first officer in command and escorting you back to your seat personally. This flight will depart as soon as we're ready. Susan's face crumpled. Captain, please, I've been with this airline for 20 years. Then you should have known better, Captain Mitchell said firmly. James held up a hand. Captain, I appreciate that, but I'm not getting back on that flight. Too many passengers witnessed what happened. It would be uncomfortable for everyone. Please rebook me on the next available flight. I'll wait. Are you sure? I'm sure, but I'm going to write a full report about this incident. And I'm going to recommend a comprehensive review of how our flight crews handle interactions with passengers of color. Captain Mitchell nodded. I'll support that 100%. And James, I'm sorry. This shouldn't have happened. No, James agreed. It shouldn't have. Susan was escorted away by airline staff, her career at SkyBridge effectively over. James was rebooked on a flight 2 hours later, upgraded to first class, and given a profuse apology from the gate manager. The next morning, James was in his office by 7 a.m. He drafted a detailed incident report, then called an emergency meeting with the airline's chief operating officer, head of HR, and director of customer service. We have a problem, James began, and yesterday I experienced it firsthand. He walked them through everything. The questioning, the assumptions, the public humiliation, the security escort. Then he presented data his team had been quietly compiling for months. Complaints from black passengers about being questioned more frequently in premium cabins, moved from first class to economy, or subjected to additional screening. The patterns were undeniable, and James's personal experience had brought it into sharp focus. Here's what we're going to do, James said. Mandatory implicit bias training for all flight crews. Not the online checkbox kind, real training. We're going to audit our customer service interactions and measure whether passengers of different races are treated equally. We're going to create an anonymous reporting system for passengers who experience discrimination, and we're going to take this seriously. The COO nodded slowly. How do you want to handle Susan Whitfield? She's already suspended. I recommend termination, not because she made a mistake, but because her actions revealed a pattern of judgment that we can't have on our flights. She's been with us 20 years, plenty of time to learn better.